Hey,
Hi.
it's Jack and Mary again, and this is a special edition of By Our Love. We are going to be sharing about what transpired in our lives a year ago.
hmm
We're going to talk about three miracles today. One is really big, and the two are smaller, still very, very interesting how they all work together. And we're not going to be talking theology, we're just talking this is what happened. So, Mary, how'd this all get started?
Well, in January of last year, I started having some symptoms, coughing and various things that I thought might be COVID or something else. And so eventually, when I was taking stuff, trying to get rid of it, and I couldn't get rid of it. So I went to the doctors in April, and she said that I probably had a secondary infection. She ran some tests and gave me a Z-Pack, which really made me sick. And then I ended up going to the hospital in, I don't even know what.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's
Yeah,
just you got sick and you
yeah.
ended up quitting your job
I did have to quit
because
my job
you
like in the
couldn't
middle
work
of
anymore.
May.
Did you have
Yeah.
any energy?
No, I did not. I finally ended up not having energy to do anything. I felt horrible every day. And I thought the Z-Pack at first was the thing that was, making me worse. And I found out that that was not the case at
Yeah,
all.
no. So Mary
So,
started out by getting sick,
mhm.
and so in January of last year, this is very miraculous how this transpired. In January of last year, Mary and I were praying, and I just felt like I was supposed to retire
Mhm.
from children's ministry, and gotta be honest, I really didn't. And still, I kind of wrestle with it. Like, yeah, I kind of really didn't want to retire. But we felt like we had to be obedient.
Yes.
So we went ahead and said we were going to retire. Well, it wasn't a very, I mean, I put in my notice to be done and then I couldn't leave. And so,
Okay.
they were fine with me staying until I could leave. But finally, on June 3rd of last year was going to be our last Sunday at church. And if you think about this, this is so miraculous. In January, we're feeling like I'm supposed to retire. Well, and then I retired. I turned in my notice and said I'd be like 3 weeks. And then I couldn't retire because our place to live hadn't opened up yet. And
Mhm.
the Social Security hadn't opened. And, we had money, but I didn't want to retire without that Social Security coming in. So we delayed the whole thing. And finally it came through, and it just like it took forever. And finally on
Mhm.
June 3rd, I was able to say this is our last Sunday.
Mhm.
But what's really miraculous about this is on June 7th, 6th or 7th, we're in the emergency room, and Mary is very sick. It turns out Mary has a heart problem, and her mitral valve, as we were going to find out, had exploded, and her lungs were filling with fluid, and it was just a mess. And I needed to be 100% focused on taking care of everything, moving, because I'm retiring, we're moving, and being there for my wife. And if I still had a job,
You couldn't do that.
I wouldn't have been able to do that. And yet God knew that.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. In January of 6 months before, it was like, you need to retire. And so I did. And that's miraculous
Yeah.
that once I retired, we're at the emergency room and I'm able to be there to take care of Mary and help take care of everything. So why don't you briefly go over what was going on in the hospitals? We had 3 hospital
Okay.
stays. We're not going to go details of all of them, but they're getting progressively worse.
Yes. The first hospital was in Columbus, Indiana, because that's where we were serving. And they were the ones who found out that I had a heart problem. They thought I had a blood clot, but that ended up not being the case. I was told by a wonderful doctor who sat down and figured things out. She said, you need to have surgery, but the person here really hasn't done too many of those surgeries. Well, we were moving to Dayton and we had lived in Dayton, so I figured that this big city, there would be, someone available. Well, there wasn't. And so when we moved in June, then I ended up in the emergency room
Hospital
at the
again.
hospital, and
So why were you constantly having to go to the
because
hospital?
my lungs and my stomach and back were filling up with fluid, and
So,
my legs.
so what, you think the legs and the
Yeah,
the
the
stomach
feet.
are a big deal? What was the real big deal? What couldn't you do?
I couldn't breathe. So yeah,
That's the big deal. You
so they
couldn't
would
breathe.
give me medication for that, Lasix, and send me home. And then it wasn't very much longer, and I have to go back in the hospital because I just couldn't breathe.
Yeah. So, you're thinking about it. Were your trips back to the emergency room coming more frequently?
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll
Okay.
be talking about that. So, was it a good time in the hospital?
Well, no, but I could breathe better.
Yeah, getting in there could breathe better.
Yes.
But we're going to be talking about a little bit what happened in Indianapolis. I don't know the date. It was the Saturday before her surgery. I call it the night, and she'll
Yeah.
be talking about that because that was special.
Well, I ended up back in the hospital on July 5th, today, a year ago,
Yes,
and
today.
because I couldn't breathe again, I would stay up at night, and so in the meantime, Jack was trying to work. That's another miracle we're going to be talking about.
I don't talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I needed to have a surgeon, and the doctors kept saying you need to have surgery. Okay.
1, 2, 3. Sooner rather than
later.
later.
But they wouldn't give me the surgery. And so they said finally we had to find out later that particular hospital did not even do heart surgery. Yeah. So God is merciful. I ended up coming home, and then in July, and I was able to go. Also, that was another miracle. I was able to go see a really famous surgeon in Indianapolis.
And that's what I'm going to talk about now.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm interrupting her. We're going to go right into that. So
another miracle.
And well, this is miracle number 2 that we're talking about. The first one was the retirement thing, which is a huge deal if you think about it. What are the odds that all that would work together? Well, Mary had mentioned that the surgeon they had assigned her in Columbus said, I can't do this. Well, our daughter had pulled some strings and got us with a cardiologist in the Dayton area where we were moving. And we had an appointment for August 18th. 15th. She remembers it was August 15th. And the thing is I felt in my spirit Mary wasn't going to be alive August 15th. And that I had to do something to really move this forward. Okay, so we had a dog attack. Do some editing here. So I'd call Columbus. I would call, and they said, you got to get this moving. So nothing I did could get anything earlier than August 15th. And August 15th was just with a cardiologist. That wasn't with the surgeon. With the surgeon. So I remember Monday, June, whatever, a week before Mary's birthday, we had just moved to the Dayton area. And I called the office to make sure I had canceled the appointment in Columbus, Indiana, because we weren't going to go there. We were here in Dayton now. And she said, oh, we were just talking about you. And I was like, what? And she goes, I hear you're having trouble getting, this was actually Friday. Sorry, this was Friday. I hear you're having trouble getting them to move the appointment up. Well, they need to move it up because this is pretty serious. So I said, okay. This was like 8 a.m, and it went all day, and I didn't hear back from her. So she said if I hadn't heard back, to call back Monday morning. So I called back Monday morning, and I go, I haven't heard from them. And she goes, we can't mess around with this. We have a surgeon in Indianapolis that we were going to have do this, who we was going to recommend you to. Do you want me to call them and see what we can do and just skip this step in Dayton? So she said, give me the day. So I waited the day, and surely like at 5 o'clock exactly, I hadn't heard from her. So I called her, and she says, yep, I got you an appointment for this Friday with a doctor, with a surgeon who does this all the time. And people travel from all over the country to come to him to do these mitral valve surgeries. So that was pretty miraculous that I was trying really hard because I knew the situation for Mary was very serious. I didn't know why, and we're going to find out in a little bit. I've even learned more details since the surgery in the last few months of how serious Mary's condition was and why she was ending up in the hospital so frequently. So, yeah, got the appointment. And there's a little side humorous story there. She's in the hospital that week. It wasn't maybe the next day we're back in the hospital in the emergency room and they admit her. And on Wednesday, the people in Dayton go, well, she needs surgery sooner rather than later. And like, well, we're leaving tomorrow. We're checking her out. And he's like, I don't think we're going to check her out. And I said, wild horses are not keeping us away from that appointment with the surgeon. She's got to have surgery. We have an appointment. We're going. And so he came back in the next day and said, yeah, we thought about it. We're going to let you go. I was like, well, we were leaving anyway. So now we're going to jump ahead to Indianapolis because they told us to quit going into the emergency room constantly. Just come to Indianapolis where they're having the surgery. And let's talk about the night.
Well, it was a Saturday night, I believe, and was just in really bad shape. Couldn't breathe, just could not breathe. And the nurse kept coming in. She checked my vitals and everything, and I'd say, I can't breathe. And she said, well, your vitals are fine. So Jack had been staying with me on a cot in the hospital room, and so he finally got a nurse. It was 4 a.m, and he said to her,
seemed like it was always 4 a.m. Yeah,
he said to her, you need to get a doctor. And so she got he was a wonderful doctor. And he came in, he gave me oxygen, and they actually sent me pretty quickly to the pulmonary care unit.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's where I went.
Yep.
And that was, I was supposed to have my surgery, robotic surgery, on Wednesday on July 12th, but they did not have an operating room available. They had the robot, but they didn't have the operating room. So they had to move it up to July 19th the following week.
And if they'd had surgery on July 12th, we wouldn't be making this video. Because Mary was fine on July 12th. It was on July 18th and 19th that Mary was not fine. Yeah. And let's just move on to the big one.
Okay.
We can just back and forth, but the surgeon came in on let's go back. There's 3 numbers here. The surgeon came in on when we saw the surgeon in June. He said, "Oh, she had a 98% chance of survival. That there was not much of an issue here at all, and he'd get it taken care of." And then when we saw him on the 12th, which was the day that we could have had the surgery, he said, 90. We're having some issues here. Mary's heart's getting worse. And then he kind of lectured us a little bit about irresponsibility, but that's a whole nother story at all together. But so it was down to 90%. And then the night happened on Saturday. And then we saw him on Tuesday before the surgery. And what did he say, Miss Mary?
He said that I wasn't going to make it. He just looked at me and he said, I can fix your mitral valve. I also had my tricuspid valve that needed repairing. And he said, I can fix those 2 valves. He goes, I can do that. He goes, I can't restart your heart. He said, I've never seen a heart so enlarged. And so I looked at him and I said, I serve a bigger God than that. And his assistant, physician's assistant, I think it was PA. She is a Christian, and so her name was, well, I won't give names, but she was very sweet. And when he left the room, I asked her to come and we prayed. And then she told me, she said, I'll be by your side the entire surgery. And so I was given, I know this, by the Holy Spirit, so much peace that I was never afraid. I was never a question in my mind that I was going to make it.
Yeah.
And so I did not have any fear. I did not have any trepidation, nothing. I knew that I was going to make it. So
even though the doctor said the surgeon said there was 0 chance.
Yes.
You now had a 0 chance to live. Yeah. And faith in God is awesome. And what else did she say? She said, the God that started your heart
when I was born.
At first. Well, the heart started before you were born.
Yeah.
But the God that first started your heart the first time can start it again
Amen.
the second time, and that's some faith there.
Amen.
So from my point of view, let's explain a little about what's going on. Mary's mitral valve has exploded. We don't know when it exploded, and one of the reasons that we got reprimanded by the surgeon was you're supposed to, these things are supposed to be taken care of. They're not supposed to get to the place.
It's an elective surgery.
It's an elective surgery, and hers was not elective. They were like when I looked at him and said, so my wife's going to die tomorrow, and he said, well, we have no choice. She's going to die anyway. And we could tell how it was getting worse and worse and worse at her heart. So what a muscle does, this is what I've learned, what a muscle does, this heart is working harder and harder and harder, and it's not getting stronger, it's getting weaker trying to push the blood out, so it's getting bigger and bigger. Well, as the muscle gets bigger and bigger, it gets weaker and weaker. Muscles get thick when they're getting stronger. If they're getting thin, they're getting weaker. So her heart was getting weaker and weaker. And one of my concerns as we were going through this is that the heart would just stop because it was working so hard. So we're not going to get into what I went through with this and my doubts and my struggles, but my wife was unmoving. And then we know what happened because she's sitting here next to me, but we were told that she was going to die.
And that even if I did survive, the recovery would be horrible.
Brutal was the
Brutal,
word he used.
Which it was not.
Yeah. And when Mary said, we serve a bigger God than that, or I serve a bigger God than that, he looked at her and said, well, you have the biggest heart I've ever seen. Kind of refuting her, saying, well, physically, there ain't no way your heart's starting again. And the neat thing is the anesthesiologist, and we won't go into all the details of how that happened, but basically said when your heart was supposed to start again, it
started right up.
Instantly started again.
Yes, he told us it did.
So in closing, Miracle Girl here, we have learned that every day is a gift.
Amen.
And that every day God gives us, His grace is enough. And we went through the gates of hell, essentially, and He was with us the whole way.
Yeah.
And we did it together. And He is awesome.
Yes.
And we also have shared the story at churches, and we're willing to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're interested in hearing, this is the short version.
God gave us many special nurses and doctors and people along the way that really ministered to us and were there for us. He is always with us. And He is enough.
She really is Miracle Girl because her recovery has not been brutal. Mm-hmm. There's, technically based on the cardiologist, she's not out of the woods yet, but biking 32 miles, walking 6 miles, that's pretty amazing. And we thank God for that. And whatever we can do to give Him the glory for the miracle He has performed in our lives. And I am so grateful and thankful that after 45 years of marriage, I get to spend more time with the love of my life. And we get to do this by our Love channel. So thank you, everyone. God bless, and thanks for listening. And share this if you know someone who needs encouragement, because God can do anything. And I don't know why He chose to do what He did with Mary, because in most cases with the heart like that, the surgeon's probably right. She's probably not waking up. But God said, nah, I'm not done with you. And if God says it,
it is.
And it is going to happen.
Yeah.
God bless everybody, and subscribe to By Our Love. All right.
Amen.
God bless.
God bless you.
God is amazing.
Yes, He is.
Bye.
Bye-bye.